Hey, everybody. Welcome to Battleground. This is the show where we never retreat and we never surrender. I've got a really important episode this week. A guy named Matt Coday's coming on. He's the founder of the Oil and Gas Workers Association. He's a pretty incredible guy. He's a guy that actually works for a living. One of the things that I noticed when I was on the campaign trail for the House and the Senate was just how much our oil and gas workers here in America are maligned by bad faith actors who don't know a whole lot about the industry. Now, our oil and gas workers, they put their lives on the line for this country. It's a dangerous job. Sometimes these people are working like 12, 13, 14 hours a day, and what they do makes our lives so much better. I mean, obviously, their hard work in the field allows us to fill up our cars and our trucks with cheap gas. They're the ones that allow us to have lights on in our house at night, and they work their butts off for us, and it's often a very thankless job. So the oil and gas industry is something that's obviously very, very important to me. I don't like to see these great patriots be maligned as they are, and the fact of the matter is this. Most people in this country don't understand the oil and gas industry. They don't understand the national security benefits. They don't understand the economic benefits. And they really don't understand that there's a moral component to a strong oil and gas or energy sector as well. And that is that rich people that are in the top 1%, or even people that are doing real well for themselves in the middle class, when gas prices go up, they don't suffer as much. So when you have a regime like the Biden administration that's in office, that is at war with our oil and gas industry, like, for example, on day one, they dismantled the Keystone Pipeline. I mean, that really hurt our country. That really hurt our energy industry. When you have a regime or a president that is at war with an industry, it disproportionately affects lower income Americans who can't really afford to put gas in their car or heat their homes now. So this is an important episode. I hope you watch it. Matt Coday is a great patriot. And go online after you watch or listen and look up the Oil and Gas Workers Association. It's an organization that supports the workers and the people who sacrifice the most for our country. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this episode. As always, thank you for tuning in. Make sure that you subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can also subscribe to YouTube or Rumble. There will be lots more exclusive content there. As always, God bless you all, and God bless this incredible country that we get to call home. Hey, Matt, what's going on? It's great to have you.
Hey, Sean, thanks for having me on. Honored to be here.
Yeah, I've seen you all over the place. I mean, you founded the Oil and Gas Workers Association, and oil and gas is something that is monumentally important to me. I'm from Pennsylvania, man. We got Marcellus Shale up here, right. And the oil and gas industry in our state, something like 600,000 jobs, both directly and indirectly associated with that industry. And American energy independence is something that is incredibly important. So that's why I appreciate you and your organization. But one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, Matt, is that you have a pretty awesome story. And so I just want to start, tell me, take me back to the beginning. Where are you from? What was your upbringing like?
Sure. It was 1977. I believe it was a clear day. There was zero climate change in Lubbock, Texas. I was born. No, hey, I grew up in this industry. I'm the oldest of three kids. I'm the oldest grandchild on both sides. Fourth generation oil field worker. My dad, both my grandpas, my great grandpa worked in the oil field. I come from an oil, ag, and education family. My mom, most of her siblings, and a lot of my cousins, they're teachers, they're educators, coaches. So I come from a family in West Texas, about 45 miles west of Lubbock. We grew up in the oil field. My dad still works in the oil field. He's the director of maintenance for an oilfield trucking company here in the Permian Basin. And I grew up in this industry like a lot of people out here. In the bust of 86, I was 9 years old, the oldest of three kids. I remember that we, like a lot of Americans, we lost almost everything we had to sell the house, had to turn in one of the two new cars, and had to move eventually. But my parents, like every American family, they did everything they could to make sure we were fed. After about 6 months in the Summerfield addition to Keller, we moved back to West Texas, and my dad worked, and I think this is AOC math, but my dad worked about 1,083 hours a week in a hot oil truck to make sure that we had everything we needed. My mom went back to school and became a teacher. And, we did what every American family does. We made it. My mom and dad eventually, once my mom, she became a teacher, we were a two-income family, and we've seen the booms and busts ever since. I broke out on an old Kelly rig in 98 and worked rig floors off and on until 2004. I got out of the oil field. I came back to it in 2011, really at the height of the shale revolution in America right here in the Permian Basin, and moved to Midland. And I've been here ever since.
Give me a sense of when you said the bust of 86. Explain that to people who are watching and listening.
Sure. That was when oil prices fell. We laid down a bunch of rigs. And from what my grandpa says, now I was 9 years old, but apparently there were acres and acres and acres of oil field equipment for sale at rock bottom prices in 1986. And I hear that the bust of 1980 was even worse, but 86 is the one that I remember. For a lot of people who are a little bit younger than me, they probably remember 2008, the great financial crisis, and they probably remember the end of the Obama-Biden administration as well in 2015, 2016, 2017, whenever we were beginning President Trump's administration and really starting to go back to drilling here and drilling now. But it took a couple of years into President Trump's administration before we were able to ramp back up. So people would most probably compare it to 2015, 2016 right now, and how slow oil was, how many rigs weren't running. And then under President Trump's administration, man, we were booming. Of course, during President Trump's administration, U.S. operators had the confidence to drill, knowing that we had an administration in the White House that supported American workers and families. We don't have that now. The other thing I compare it to, of course, is 2020, when after the double whammy of the COVID pandemic and the Saudi-Russia price war, President Trump brokered an end to the Saudi-Russia price war and saved as many American jobs as possible. But in 2020, 2021, not a whole lot of drilling activity, not a whole lot of oil demand, and that's really a bust.
Well, Matt, so one of the things that has always surprised me, and I've, my dad has worked in nuclear energy almost his, for 43 years, just retired, about a month or so ago, worked on aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines for the Navy as a contractor for the Navy. So energy has always been a part of my family as well.
Right.
But what surprises me so much about where we are as a country, it seems like people don't understand the industry at all. And I think part of that is that you have all of these, the chimera of green energy and these radical greens, as I like to call them, and many of these nonprofits that these Americans work for are funded by our global adversaries like China and Russia, precisely so that we kneecap ourselves in the marketplace.
Right.
But help us understand, when you say your dad worked in an oil field, educate us and tell us what exactly that means.
The oil and gas industry nationwide, it's oil drilling, it's gas drilling. Whether we're drilling specifically for oil and get associated gas, whether we're drilling specifically for natural gas, the oil and gas industry is far-reaching. It's an upstream, a midstream, and a downstream sector, all the way from drilling wells, getting it to market, refining it, exporting it, using it here in the country. Those three sectors, and it accounts for a lot of jobs. In fact, the statistic that I love to point out is that during President Trump's administration in 2019, our oil and gas industry supported 11.3 million jobs nationwide and 7.9% of our nation's GDP. And you bring up a great point about how our enemies are funding some of these organizations to try to get the U.S. to kneecap ourselves. I was very surprised last year in October. So last year, Wayne Christian, my friend, and was the chairman of the Railroad Commission, is still a commissioner, but he appointed me to the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission. So I fly to Baltimore, and on Monday morning, I show up for breakfast. And the breakfast is sponsored by EOG Resources, a great company, by the way, and the Environmental Defense Fund. And I looked at that going, huh? Anyway, during a presentation on carbon capture and storage, which was presented by a gentleman from North Dakota, this EDF attorney, and it was easy to spot him. He was the only one wearing a mask in a room full of other people. But he jumps up and starts giving his own rebuttal, his own presentation, and I think, well, this guy's rude. Anyway, I left the room. I'm standing outside. He walks by me, and I guess he overheard me mention EDF and this attorney, and he's like, oh, hey, right here. And I thought, all right, we'll do this here. So I started asking him questions. I said, hey, your website says that y'all have 3 million members in the United States, Mexico, Indonesia, and China. He said, yes, we do. I said, great. How is your racial equity program going in China? He looked at me puzzled. He's like, well, we don't have one. I said, interesting. I said, how is your equality program going in Venezuela? And he's like, we don't have one of those. He said, what does it matter to you? I said, here's what matters to me. I said, here in America, you radical environmental groups, you have your sights set on shutting down USA oil and gas production, but you don't have any of these environmental justice or other programs going on in other countries. You seem focused only on killing American oil and gas jobs.
What did he say to that?
He asked me if we could discuss this later, and then he handed me a business card with pronouns on it. We've never talked since. I don't know. Maybe I sent the wrong email.
Well, I mean, look, I think when you look at everything that we have here in this country, all of the abundance and the sort of miracle of the free market in America that built our economy over the last 50, 60, 70 years, everything that we have is tied to the oil and gas industry in some way. And it always blows me away, man, how
Absolutely.
People just don't seem to understand that, from the tires in their cars to the clothes that they wear to the cups that we drink out of. Everything, I mean, obviously, in addition to to cheap gas and oil and fuel, everything's tied to it, and people don't realize the impact of the industry. So you said, like, your family, obviously you come from a legacy oil field family. How did your father react when in 1986 when the market completely collapsed?
You know, I was 9, so my dad was never, just, hey, this is awful. And, my dad's always been a very stoic, just, we're going to figure it out kind of guy. And he and my mom always have figured it out. I don't remember a whole lot of reaction whenever I was 9. I know it couldn't have been easy. I remember my dad, an uncle of mine, and my grandpa tried roofing for a while, and that didn't work because back in 1986, 87, there weren't a whole lot of people spending money on home repairs. There wasn't a whole lot of money. America had crashed. I'm not thinking 1929 crash, but eventually, I remember whenever we moved to the Summerfield edition of Keller, and I always point that out because back in 1987, whenever you said you lived in Keller, people would say, oh, hey, do you know Ross Perot? No, we were in the other part of Keller. But my dad cleaned carpets for a living, and my mom stocked facial tissue for Kimberly-Clark for 6 months in Fort Worth just to keep us fed. And eventually, we missed West Texas. And we went back, and my dad worked for some great employers. My dad worked his butt off, just like every single American does right now. I mean, look at the Biden economy. Bidenomics is destroying every American, where we're falling further and further behind. And with Title 42 set to end and inflation, which Joe Biden and his administration have caused, every American worker is having to work harder to try to stay at the same level, and it's just hard. So I imagine it was hard on my parents, but they didn't really show it.
Well, so how did you? So you're a high schooler, right? Like you're 9 in 1986, but how did you decide that you were going to follow in your dad's footsteps and work in the oil and gas industry as well?
Oh, I didn't want to. I wanted to be an attorney. And I remember.
Wait a second. Wait. How? You wanted to be an attorney?
I was a 2-time state championship debater in high school with kind of bound for law school with a full ride
scholarship. You were a debate team guy? You're just like full of surprises, man.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't want to wind up in the oil field. Man, I'm glad God put me here. I love the oil field. I love the oil and gas industry. Whenever I was growing up, I didn't want to be away from home all that time. I didn't want to be, like my dad exactly. Because I rarely saw him. And if you think, being around the oil and gas industry, there are a lot of men and women who come out here to the Permian Basin or come there to the Marcellus or go to Alaska or go to Louisiana or go to Colorado or Wyoming who spend weeks and weeks and weeks away from their families so that they can work and make a good living so they can support their families so their kids have everything they never had. And that's what a lot of people in this country don't get. They are willing to give our jobs to foreign countries with far less environmentally conscious standards, and they are willing to kill American jobs. They don't understand the sacrifice that the hardworking men and women of our oil and gas industry make every single day. My friend Dr. John Spires, he ran for land commissioner here in Texas last year, and he said, Matt, we really need to be showing that America's oil and gas workers are superheroes. And the men and women of this industry really are. There's a guy here in the Permian Basin that I've tried to get on a couple of times whenever I've been on some other interviews. He's like, man, I'd love to be on there, but that's at 3:50 a.m., and I'm headed to location at that time. It's not just some 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or 9 to 4 job out here. The men and women who work in the oil and gas industry often are working 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day plus sometimes.
Well, Matt, here's the thing. Run for Congress, run for Senate. I got a chance to tour a lot of the oil and gas companies here in Western Pennsylvania. It was something that was really personal to me. I love that industry and I love the people. And you realize that all the people that are out there working on site, on rigs, and you're right, they're working crazy long hours. It's super difficult, tough work. These are the men and women in this country that keep this country going. They're the ones, like if you're out eating or you're at a bar, the lights are on in that bar because there are men and women out there working their butts off that keep it that way, to make sure that we have power, the ability to heat our homes or the ability to fuel our automobiles. And so what really pissed me off running was the opposition that they faced and the cavalier attitude of many politicians. And I'm not talking about just Democrats, although it's mostly Democrats, but also some Republicans,
right,
about the industry. And they trot out these talking points all the time about, climate change bullshit. And it's insulting to the people who are out there sacrificing for this, to give us what we have here. And you're right. I mean, oil and gas workers who are out there on those rigs every day, those roughnecks, I mean, they are heroes in this country, but they're not treated that way.
That's right. First of all, let me cover a few things. Number one, you should be a senator right now. It should be Senator Sean Parnell.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
One day, I think you're a badass. And I tell you that every time I get a chance. I'm so grateful you joined the Advisory Board of Oil and Gas Workers Association because I just think the world of you. Number two, let's talk about climate change. Everything, American oil and gas workers get blamed for everything. It's too hot, climate change. It's too cold, climate change. It's too wet, climate change. It's too dry, climate change. Last year, all my pants shrunk. I'm pretty sure that was climate change. It couldn't possibly be Southern-made donuts. Shout out there. But yeah, even some Republicans have latched onto this climate change BS. What people don't understand, and it was Senator John Neely Kennedy out of Louisiana who said, if you kill American oil and gas jobs, you only make the problem that you think exists worse. Here in the United States, between 2005 and 2019, American oil and gas workers reduced emissions by 12%. And the great miracle of that statistic is that the shale revolution in America happened during those years. We were booming. Under President Trump, we were drilling like crazy. And we still reduced emissions. Now, I saw earlier an article about how Joe Biden wants to impose new, regulations on the power industry and reduce carbon emissions. What are you doing about China? And that was one of the things I asked that Environmental Defense Fund attorney. I said, China produces over twice the annual carbon emissions as the United States, and China's not even considered a developed nation yet. So while we're focused on, we got to be cleaner here, we're going to be greener there, we got to reduce emissions, we got to capture this. One of the questions I asked that EDF guy was, whose carbon are we capturing? And he's like, I don't know. Nobody knows. They are fed some talking points. They don't understand how to back up their argument. And while we kill American oil and gas jobs through what sounds like do-good environmental regulations, our enemies are going to town, and they are taking American oil and gas jobs, and they are taking over America's global market share.
You're completely right. Okay, break down the shale revolution for people who are watching and listening. Help us understand what that means.
Sure. Revolutionary technology. And in fact, Harold Hamm, CEO of Continental Resources, great man. I love to hear his story. And a lot of people who really brought in some technology that had been developed before. And we were able to frack for oil, frack for gas, and it really brought America towards energy independence because we were able to produce more. We were able to get to more oil and gas just through innovative technology, where we were able to drill a little bit further, and I believe we're over 4 miles that we can drill now, and inching towards 5. So being able to do that rather than going all vertical wells, we were able to bring out more oil, bring out more natural gas, and we were able to extract it faster. That's what made America energy dominant.
And it's safe, and look, this is not an infomercial for for the oil and gas industry. It really is safe. Like, I wouldn't bullshit people who are watching or listening. You go out there and tour some of those facilities, some of those facilities, and watch how they measure, methane, for example. I mean, it's like being on the Star Trek Enterprise. I mean, it is so unbelievably safe. And all of this, we were able to accomplish all of this through market-based innovations. And none of it happens, by the way, without oil and gas workers and executives being committed to the environment. So all these purple-haired freaks that are out there protesting at these green energy nonprofits or at these, green nonprofits, again, many of which are subsidized by our global enemies, the people that are working in the field on these oil and gas rigs care about the environment a hell of a lot more than people that are out there protesting on the streets, because they live and work in that environment every day. Of course they want to protect it.
Right. It's insane the amount of misinformation that some of these people are fed. If you're as old as me, some people only know about our oil and gas industry, the Exxon Valdez, Deepwater Horizon, and Seagulls covered in oil. That's what's pumped down their throats. We've got a bunch of, you call them purple-haired. I've seen some green-haired ones. And I've seen some blondes, some brunettes. A bunch of kids staring at plastic phones yelling, "We've got to just stop oil." They have no idea, that oil and gas is in powers or transports every single thing they see and touch. They have no idea what they're talking about.
What's really amazing to me, and we'll shift to the policy side of things, which we've been talking about sort of since the beginning, because the oil and gas industry, as people who are watching and listening are learning, is inextricably tied to many, many policies that, at least in America, that harm the industry. And when we push this green energy stuff here, right? You already mentioned that Russia and China and India, they don't care. They don't have emission standards there. So if you're in China, they're putting up 1 or 2 coal-fired power plants every day. They don't care. They are doing what's necessary to keep their economy thriving, and keep their military lethal, right? But here in America, the more we push this green energy nonsense, the more it actually empowers countries like China and Russia. One, for example, like when we kneecap our oil and natural gas industry, it makes Russia globally the number one provider of natural gas, especially all over Eastern and Western Europe. And
right,
when you're talking about green energy, like the rare earth minerals and some of the minerals that we need to create those lithium ion batteries, for example, the lion's share, market share of almost all of that stuff is held in China. So when we shift our entire economy to a battery-based energy industry or green energy, we're buying a lot of that stuff from China. And if there's ever a conflict, which anyone that's watching or listening to this program knows, COVID shined a light on a lot of our supply chain issues in which China controlled the vast majority of our, medical supply, antibiotics, critical infrastructure that we were buying from them. We couldn't get computer chips is a good example. So as we continue to push this green energy stuff, all we're doing is empowering our enemies and hurting our own country. It's mind-boggling to me.
You're absolutely right, and people don't understand how dangerous that is. And, if you ever see one of my tweets, it is this. Joe Biden is draining our strategic petroleum reserve in what even he called a time of war. It is a threat to our national security. He is weakening our national security. And Joe Biden also proves one of our points every time he releases from the SPR, that more oil is the answer to lower gas prices. It's insane that people don't get that those two things go together. Sean, you're a veteran, a badass veteran, by the way. Thank you for your service. We don't get to do. Let me restart that. We get to do the things we do. We get to live in this free country because of you and every other veteran who have laid your lives on the line for us. So we appreciate you. And you can't continue to do what you do without oil and gas. Whenever we look at how the United States, how oil won World War II, because we needed oil back then, and we were able to cut off Hitler's supplies. Our supplies are being cut off. We can look back on that historically and know that, starving people of oil means they're going to lose a war. People need to realize that's what's happening to the United States. And we've seen how China has taken control of whole nations through investments in their economies. One of the things that I've testified on was right here in Texas, Senator Colcourse, Senate Bill 147, to ban China and other hostile foreign entities, not just from taking control of farmland, but from buying, leasing, investing in, and any other way taking control of our oil and gas, other mineral resources, like you mentioned, those rare earth metals, all water and associated infrastructure, because we don't want our enemies controlling our supply chain right here in our country.
First of all, the idea that the Chinese Communist Party can come to America and buy up large swaths of land, first of all, not enough people know about it. You would think that would be on the front page of every paper in the country or the lead-in of every national news network on every show in the country every night. I mean, it's a huge threat to our national security. And the fact that you're standing in the breach fighting against that stuff, Matt, speaks volumes of your character. And it also, the Oil and Gas Workers Association of America is leading the charge in a lot of that stuff. You talked about our military. Did you see the Secretary of Energy in the Biden administration wants to make all military vehicles fully electric by some absurd time frame, like in 2035? Like, can you imagine, solar powered up armored Humvees or all electric Humvees? First of all, how the hell do you charge them without how do you charge them without a robust oil and gas industry to back it up? But what if you're out in the field and it's cloudy or you can't get access to a charger? I don't understand. And not only that, that those vehicles, if they're powered strictly by electric, aren't going to be as they're not going to have the power necessary to carry all that armor and between 5 and 15 troops. It's just all insane. Like this is a threat to our national security.
We're going to attack y'all tomorrow. We're charging our batteries today, but we're going to attack y'all tomorrow. It's stupid. Last week, whenever I was in Austin and we were working on some bills, trying to get them through the Texas House, get them to Governor Abbott's desk, and then working over a little bit on the Senate side, I got the incredible honor, invitation to go up to Killeen, right next to Fort Hood, which is now Fort Cavazos. And Lieutenant Colonel Bob Crouch gave me a tour of the National Mounted Warrior Museum, which the grand opening is this year, November 8th. And I hope that you, Melanie, and the kids can join me for it. But I want to talk about, I asked him about this idea from the Energy Secretary and the Biden administration. I said, hey, what do you think about this whole proposal to make all armored vehicles EVs and just to really completely change our military? He said, it won't work. And everybody who has half a brain knows it won't work. Unfortunately, we have Joe Biden.
Yeah, man. It's concerning. And, any oil and gas executive or anybody that's working here in this country will tell you that, under Biden or Obama, but before him, they're afraid to invest in their own companies. They're afraid to buy new equipment. I mean, when you look at the Keystone Pipeline, how many billions of dollars were invested in that? And Biden, like on his first day in office, like with a stroke of a pen, is like, oh, well, I'm just going to cancel this. Like, never mind the 11,000 plus jobs that are associated with the Keystone Pipeline. But what about the billions of dollars invested from private companies to make the pipeline happen? So how do you run a business like that?
In Biden and his press secretary, they keep talking about these 9,000 permits. Well, U.S. operators have 9,000 permits to drill. What they don't tell everybody, and what a lot of people don't understand, is that we need a whole lot more than just those permits. Look at the MVP pipeline, which carries natural gas from the Marcellus Shale over into West Virginia, Virginia. Approving that pipeline is necessary in order to be able to drill something, because we can drill all day long.
What do you do
if we don't have a way to get that to market, it's useless. You talked about Joe Biden, and he nominated Omarova to be comptroller of the currency, a Marxist woman who said that she wanted oil and gas companies to go bankrupt. And then, of course, we got Janet Yellen, Biden's Treasury Secretary. She's been asking banks to defund fossil fuel projects. We've got other agencies being weaponized against us. Interior, Deb Haaland there. Transportation. And then, of course, the Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, who has multiple times floated the possible reimposition of the crude oil export ban. So when people, if they've set themselves against our industry, or if they only read certain news sources, they go, oh, gosh, these greedy oil companies, when it's not that at all. It's that we don't have the takeaway capacity. We don't have the pipelines. We don't have the refinery capacity. We don't control some of our refineries. We are allowing foreign countries to dictate USA oil and gas production because they own our refineries.
It's insane. I mean, what do you make of the left's assault on, well, one, it was gas stoves, which is just ridiculously stupid, and now they're talking about dishwashers and limiting people's use of water. And of course, the left and almost every member of the media, the New York Times leading the charge on this, or that the gas stove ban is just a conspiracy theory. And then New York comes out and, hey, we're not installing any more gas stoves in any residential properties. It's like clearly it's not a conspiracy theory. Like what's the end state goal of these organizations, Matt? Like, what are they trying to decrease the quality of life here in America, or do they actually believe that they're doing some good?
I think a lot of the people that these so-called environmental organizations pull in, they believe they're doing something good. A couple of years ago, I got to talk with a self-proclaimed Democratic Socialist, an AOC supporter, and I didn't think I'd ever meet one of those in person. This kid was actually intelligent. He was from the East Coast, came from a family with money. He was in Austin. I was down there for the first special session. We wound up striking up a conversation. College student. He was headed to the West Coast. And he said, oh, yeah, I'm an AOC supporter. We talked for a while, and I talked about American oil and gas. We talked about global emissions. We talked about this issue, that issue. And after about an hour of conversation, this AOC supporter, this self-proclaimed Democratic Socialist, said, you know what? You're right. It doesn't make any sense to kill American oil and gas jobs. We just have to get the information to them. Don't get me wrong. Some of them are willfully ignorant. You can hand them all the information in the world, and they're still not going to believe us. But I believe most Americans are unfortunately come to the realization that more USA oil and gas production is how we get lower gas prices. That, hang on just a minute, all this stuff these people told me, well, that's not true. And so the challenge is getting information to people. I was talking with Ernie Angelo. He was President Reagan's Texas director in 1980. And he said, Matt, the challenge is always getting information to people. We're up against a very stacked deck. You talked about the media. I haven't once seen CNN talk about how killing American oil and gas jobs would make things worse. I have seen them try to say there was Russian collusion, which we all know wasn't true. I've seen them say a bunch of other horrible things, but we haven't heard anything true come out of their mouths about American oil and gas and how increasing USA oil and gas production would actually keep barrels of oil from countries with far less environmentally conscious standards off the market, and how that would be better. Maybe they'll call me one day.
Well, a couple things. Part of I'm sure that you saw President Trump's town hall on CNN, and when asked about, hey, look, I think he took a question from somebody in the audience, and they were asking about, look, my family's basically, I'm paraphrasing here, struggling to pay the bills. Like,
sure,
what's the number one priority for your economic agenda? And Trump replied with 3 words: drill, baby, drill. And look, while that's a simple answer, he is so spot on, because what many people don't realize is that obviously over time our dollar has lost tremendous values, and now everybody's feeling inflationary pressure because of the Biden administration's reckless spending. Now, to be clear, like I love President Trump. Everybody that knows me publicly knows that I like President Trump, but he spent a lot of money as well. And that's actually one of the areas that I disagree with him a little bit, is that we just needed to be more responsible with our spending. Nevertheless, what's always been a hedge against inflationary pressure in this country economically was our ability to produce oil, gas, natural gas. And under President Trump, inflation was at its lowest level almost ever, because for the first time ever, I think within his first year of his presidency, Matt, like the United States of America became a net energy exporter, and when we're producing oil and gas, it's good for our economy. It creates jobs. I mean, obviously, there's a moral component here as well, which I think isn't talked about enough, because, hey, look, if it costs a lot to heat your house or put gas in your car, do you think it affects the wealthiest 1% or even many of the people that are in the middle class? Yeah, maybe a little bit, but it disproportionately affects people who are on fixed income or have low incomes. And so
absolutely,
there's so many different components to this, Matt. And I think, so circling back to President Trump's answer of drill, baby, drill, his instincts are spot on.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, even under Barack Obama and Joe Biden, whenever they were in office for 8 years, they rode American oil and gas workers, our industry and our jobs, to better jobs numbers, to a better economy, to increased exports, and to a booming GDP. They were the beneficiaries of the shale revolution in America. And I think it was in 2018 that Barack Obama said, well, suddenly the U.S. is the biggest oil producer. And he said, that was me, folks. I'm thinking, no, you just got the reward, the benefit of American oil and gas workers. You rode our industry to better jobs numbers. Under President Trump, he supported American oil and gas workers. That's why you saw us drilling like crazy. We knew we had an administration in the White House who had our backs. We don't have that right now. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have said even from the campaign trail, hey, we're going to transition away from your jobs. You mentioned something about foreign countries and devaluation of the dollar. My friend Randy Pettigrew, he's a state rep over in New Mexico, and he sent a letter today to U.S. reps and some other reps there in New Mexico talking about this BRICS, this Brazil, Russia, they are moving not just to make sure they have their own little system, but also to devalue the dollar. We're being attacked from all angles, and if the U.S. dollar is no longer the international standard of currency, we're in trouble.
We are in trouble. And all right, so let's circle back to you joining. Like you're not going to be a lawyer, right? You're gonna jump into the oil and
no, absolutely not.
Jump into the oil and gas industry head first. And so you've been working in that industry. You've been working in this industry how long? Because anybody that's watched this interview for 37 minutes knows that you're obviously passionate about what you do. How long you been in the industry?
Since 98 minus 7 years. So, God, that's a long time. I've been out here in the Permian Basin for the last 12 years, so 12 and 7, 19, and probably 3 before that, 22 years.
So let me ask you this. That question leads into this one. At some point you realize, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Matt, but like at some point, clearly, you get inspired to start the Oil and Gas Workers Association. And I mean, look, I'm on the advisory board here. You asked me to be a part of it, and I said, of course, because I believe in you and I believe in the industry. Honestly, the oil and gas industry makes the world a better place, period, end of story. And the people who support that industry help. The Oil and Gas Workers Association, what I liked about it is that it's about the workers. It's about looking after those workers who really are the heroes. So let me ask you this. How did you get inspired to create, or where did the inspiration come from to create the Oil and Gas Workers Association?
I started OGWA in 2015 because I just wanted to take up for American workers and families. I wanted to put a face on the industry and remind these radical environmentalists, these extreme leftists, these ignorant politicians that it's our jobs that you are willing to give to foreign countries. Because there's a lot of people, they don't care about big oil. They don't understand big oil, but they've been told that, big oil is bad. They don't care about corporations. They just think, greedy corporations. And in all of that, they're willing to give our jobs away. And I got sick and tired of watching our federal government give our jobs to foreign countries who are propped up with our tax dollars. So I started OGWA, and it really is to fight for American workers and families. And by extension, like Larry Elder says, we have a country to save. And like my friend General Flynn says all the time, energy security is national security. It impacts every single American. It's important to us whether we are Republican, Democrat, or Independent. Supporting USA oil and gas jobs is an issue that we can all come together over because it benefits every American.
So how can people support you? How can people support the organization? Where can we find you?
Sure. And people can find us at ogwausa.com. If you'd like to join OGWA, whether you're an individual member, a supporter member, or you want to join as a business for several of your members, you can find us at ogwausa.com/join. If you just want to make a donation, it's /donate. We want you to stay informed on all of the issues going on around this country, not just in Texas or Pennsylvania, but in California, at the federal level, in Louisiana, and North Dakota, and Alaska. Because every state in this nation and the federal legislature, it impacts all of us. We want people to understand more about our oil and gas jobs, to get involved, to get engaged, to show up at the polls, to make sure that we're electing candidates who really support American oil and gas workers.
All right, so break down real quickly, what are some of your leading policy initiatives right now? What are you fighting for? You mentioned like to stop the CCP from buying farmland. That's one. What else you got cooking?
Absolutely. In fact, we're headed to Austin for the next 2 weeks to make sure that we pass Senate Bill 147 out of the Texas House and get it to Governor Abbott's desk for signature. That is the Ban China bill. We're also rolling that bill out in Ohio and in Pennsylvania. Tried to get it in New Mexico and Colorado. It was too late to file. We're rolling that out at the federal level. Some other things. We've been working with a few people in D.C. to make sure that in the negotiations for raising the debt ceiling, that speeding up federal permitting from the H.R. 1 lower energy costs is not cut out of that deal. And it was, of course, in the bill that the House of Representatives passed. We're so glad that Speaker McCarthy and our allies in the United States House of Representatives included that in the negotiations. Look, we understand that maybe we have to raise the debt ceiling, and I'm learning how to compromise. But if we're going to do that, it makes no sense to raise the debt ceiling and burden every American taxpayer with more debt if we're not also going to give American workers and families a way to pay for it. And speeding up federal permitting and letting us drill, baby, drill, like President Trump said, is the only sensible solution. We're working with state legislators now in Louisiana as well as Oklahoma. We're a little bit late to Colorado. We were working on some issues earlier this session. California's under attack, and we've started working with state legislators out there and in New Mexico. So we are trying to work in every state we can. If people want to get involved, we want you to get involved. This is not a top-down push. In fact, that's how it started. I'm an oil-field truck driver. I just said, hey, you know what? I'm sick and tired of watching our federal government sell out American workers and families. If you want to get involved with us, please send us a message. Send us an email. Find us on Facebook. Find us on Twitter. We want everybody who wants to be involved because this is about every American worker, every American family. This is about America.
Brother, you're a special guy with a special passion, and there are going to be great things in your future, great things for the Oil and Gas Workers Association, and great things for this country, Matt. So thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate your time. God bless you, and God bless the work you're doing, my friend.
Man, I appreciate you, Sean. I can't say enough nice things about you. Thank you for all you do.
You're welcome, brother. We'll talk to you soon.